March 1907. A man arrives at a Park Avenue mansion asking the cook working inside for a sample of her blood, her urine, and her stool. The cook's name is Mary Mallon. She does not respond with words. She grabs a carving fork from the kitchen counter and advances toward him. The man flees. He returns later with police backup. Mallon, sensing what's coming, disappears into the house. It takes 5 hours of searching before anyone finds her, eventually betrayed by nothing more than a scrap of her dress, caught in the door of the closet where she'd been hiding the entire time. This is Dark Diagnosis Files, and this is the true story of the woman history would come to know as Typhoid Mary. Picture a summer rental home on Long Island in 1906, the kind of property a wealthy banking family might lease for a few warm months away from the city. Within a month of a new cook arriving to prepare their meals, 6 of the 11 people living in that house have fallen seriously ill. The diagnosis: typhoid fever, a brutal bacterial infection causing high fever, severe abdominal pain, and in roughly 1 in 10 cases, death. The home's owner, desperate to understand how typhoid had reached a property with no obvious contamination in its water supply, hired a sanitary engineer named George Soper to investigate. Soper's investigation initially hit dead ends. The water was clean. The food sources seemed unremarkable. But as he dug further, a pattern began to emerge that he could barely believe. He traced Mary Mallon's employment history backward through nearly a decade of domestic cooking positions, and in 7 of the 8 households where she had worked, typhoid fever had broken out shortly after she arrived. 22 confirmed cases, 2 confirmed deaths. What made this pattern so difficult to initially accept was the timing of each outbreak. Mallon would arrive at a new household. Typhoid would appear among the residents within weeks, and by the time anyone connected the dots, she had often already moved on to her next position entirely, leaving investigators chasing a trail that kept going cold the moment they thought they'd found it. This was, at the time, a genuinely radical medical idea that a person could carry and spread a deadly disease without ever experiencing a single symptom of it themselves. A close, slow shot of a kitchen counter, a cutting board, a knife resting beside half-prepared vegetables, steam rising gently from a pot on the stove. An ordinary scene, completely indistinguishable from any other kitchen in the city, in any other home, on any other day. When Soper finally approached Mallon directly to request samples for testing, her reaction was immediate and furious. She had cooked for years without ever being sick a single day in her life. To Mallon, the accusation that she was somehow responsible for spreading illness to people she'd never seen get sick herself must have sounded like an absurd, almost insulting fiction, and she made her rejection of that idea violently clear. Soper, unable to obtain samples himself, escalated the matter to the New York City Department of Health. A doctor named S. Josephine Baker was dispatched alongside 5 police officers to bring Mallon in by force. What followed was the 5-hour standoff that ended with Mallon dragged from a closet and pushed into a waiting ambulance. Baker reportedly sitting directly on top of Mallon during the entire ride to the hospital, just to keep her from resisting further. Baker later described the experience in vivid terms, comparing the ride to being trapped in a cage with an angry lion. It was, by any account, an extraordinarily undignified and frightening ordeal for everyone involved. A woman who genuinely believed herself healthy, forcibly restrained and transported against her will by a team of strangers insisting she carried an invisible threat she couldn't see, feel, or believe in. At the hospital, laboratory testing confirmed what Soper had suspected. Mallon's stool was saturated with Salmonella typhi, the bacterium responsible for typhoid fever. She was, beyond any scientific doubt, a carrier. She herself had simply never felt it. A dim, institutional room, a single barred window letting in a narrow shaft of light. Outside, water stretches in every direction, the isolated edge of an island most New Yorkers would never have reason to visit. Mallon was forcibly transferred to Riverside Hospital, an isolation facility for quarantinable diseases located on North Brother Island in the East River. She lived there for 3 years, largely alone in a small cottage adjacent to the hospital, with limited access to the broader island. In 1909, she sued the health department for her release, arguing she was being held captive without proper legal process. The case drew significant media attention, with one newspaper famously dubbing her, in print, the most harmless and yet the most dangerous woman in America. Her lawsuit failed, but in 1910, a new health commissioner agreed to release her, on one explicit condition: she would never work as a cook again. The city offered to help her find alternative employment as a domestic laundress instead, work that paid significantly less than cooking, and that Mallon, for reasons never fully documented, found difficult to sustain. For several years, health officials lost track of her entirely. Then, in 1915, a new typhoid outbreak erupted at Sloan Maternity Hospital in Manhattan. 25 people infected, 2 of them dead, almost all of them doctors and nurses working inside the very hospital meant to keep patients safe. When investigators traced the outbreak to its source, they found a cook working under a different name entirely, Mary Brown. It was Mallon. She had broken her promise, returned to cooking under an assumed identity, and brought typhoid directly into a hospital this time, rather than a private home. This second capture marked the beginning of Mallon's final permanent quarantine. She was returned to North Brother Island, where she would remain, with no further release, for the next 23 years, the rest of her life. She spent her remaining decades working in the hospital's own laboratory, helping prepare medical tests for other patients, before dying in 1938 following a paralytic stroke. Only 9 people attended her funeral. What makes Mallon's story endure as more than a simple historical curiosity is the uncomfortable ethical question buried inside it. By the time she died, New York City health officials had identified more than 400 other healthy carriers of typhoid. None of them were confined for anywhere close to the length of time Mallon endured. Historians who've studied her case have never found a fully satisfying answer for why she, specifically, became the singular example made to suffer indefinite isolation, while others, found just as medically dangerous, were simply asked to change occupations and monitored periodically instead. Some historians point to Mallon's gender, her Irish immigrant status, and her lack of family connections as likely factors in why authorities treated her so differently from other identified carriers, none of whom faced anything close to a multi-decade confinement. Others point simply to her own defiance, her repeated refusal to cooperate, as the reason she became the singular cautionary example public health officials chose to make of her. The truth is likely some combination of both, filtered through an era with far less consistent standards for how such decisions were made at all. A wide, still shot over the East River at dusk, North Brother Island visible in the distance, abandoned now, slowly being reclaimed by trees that have grown up through its empty buildings. The isolation facility that held one woman for the better part of 3 decades sits today exactly as quiet as the river surrounding it. Mallon's case remains a foundational reference point in medical ethics, cited whenever the balance between individual liberty and public health protection resurfaces in modern outbreaks. She never came to believe she was responsible for what happened to the people around her. Whether that was denial, genuine disbelief, or something else entirely, no historian has ever been able to say with certainty. This has been a real documented case in medical history. Every detail in this video is sourced from confirmed historical records and peer-reviewed medical literature. Dark Diagnosis Files investigates the horror that happens around hospitals and medicine. New cases every Sunday, Tuesday and Friday. Real, documented, told with the gravity they deserve. Subscribe. Your body is stranger than you think. Somewhere, there are still more than 400 names on a list of carriers just like her. History only remembers the name of one.